In the beautiful village of Adingama lived a very wealthy farmer named Nduka. Nduka had so much money from his large farms. But unfortunately, Nduka never employed the services of laborers, but would rather use his little children, make them work so tirelessly on the farm, and would beat them mercilessly if they didn't work as hard as they wanted. And whenever any of their mothers confronted him, Nduka wouldn't have it. He would get so angry, and the next day, he would kick the mother out of the house, claiming he had every right over his children and was unquestionable. "They are my children, and you have no right to question me," he would always say. Adama could no longer bear to see her little children labor on the farm tirelessly with little or no food. So one day, she confronted Nduka. "I don't like this, my husband," she said. "How dare you talk to me?" Nduka queried. "Pack your bags and get out of my house." He chased Adama out of the house as usual. Adama had no choice, even as the other wives and neighbors tried to plead, but it all fell on deaf ears. Adama left and began to wander in the evil forest, as she had nowhere else to go because she was an orphan. She wandered and wandered, but unfortunately, or rather fortunately, luck smiled on her, because the forest guards and the forest gods were ready to help her. They told her that she wasn't the first person who had cried in the forest and complained bitterly about Nduka's injustice, and that it was time for them to take justice. But that they had no way or no right to punish Nduka, as the land or the earth belonged to the sons of men. But they needed someone to give them the authority or to give them the permission to deal mercilessly with Nduka. Adama decided that it was time to set her little children free. And as soon as the tree opened up, she decided to give the tree the permission to take vengeance and to punish Nduka for all his injustice to all his wives and his children. The tree gods were happy. They had finally seen a mortal that would give them the permission to make Nduka pay for all his atrocities. The tree opened, and 5 beautiful maidens came out of the tree, holding gold and silver pots, looking so beautifully radiant. Their mission was to go over to Nduka's house and deal with him and make him pay for all his wickedness. Off they went, looking so innocently beautiful. As soon as they arrived at Nduka's house, he accepted them happily, thinking they had come to bless him. "We have come to make you rich, Nduka," they deceived him. "All you have to do is to take care of us for a few days, for we are sojourners. We are on our way to the land of the gods. If you treat us well, by the time we leave, we will take good care of you," they promised Nduka. And Nduka believed them and decided to feed them, give them the fattest cows and the best of foods he had to offer. Nduka continued to feed them. For days, they continued to make merry. He gave them all his farm produce, cooked so many delicious meals for them. Days upon days upon days, they continued to make merry. After a while, he made a feast for them. And before long, Nduka became poor and could no longer continue, because it had been months where he was feeding these women. And he began to borrow food items from his villagers. He borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, promising them that he would pay as soon as the maidens rewarded him. But after a while, Nduka could no longer continue. He decided to sneak into the hut where the maidens were, to to steal from the pots of gold and silver they had brought, so that he would stop borrowing, because nobody in the village was ready to give him anything anymore. But as soon as Nduka stepped into the room, he received the shock of his life. What he saw, he could not tell. The maidens had turned into angry-looking trees, and they gave Nduka the beatings of his life and warned him sternly never to maltreat any of his children nor his wives again. And afterwards, they all disappeared back into their evil forest. Nduka decided to console himself by going over to the gold and silver pots. He opened the first pot, and to his surprise, it was filled with animal dung. He went to the second pot, and all he saw were dried leaves. Nduka proceeded to the third pot and opened it, and house flies filled the entire room. He was surprised. He went ahead and opened the fourth pot, and it was filled with coal stones that were not useful for anything. And then finally he opened the last pot, and he received the shock of his life. Bees flew out of the pot and surrounded the entire room. He ran out of the room out of fear because the bees were so big. He kept on running in the middle of the night, screaming for help, but nobody came. Nduka knew that he was ruined. He had borrowed so much money from too many people in the village. He could no longer feed his children. They kept on asking and crying for food, and Nduka was helpless because he had made merry with all his farm produce. And soon his debtors came and wanted to collect their money. Nduka pleaded and pleaded as he had no means. His farm produce were gone, and he was in so much debt. He kept on pleading and pleading. He was a poor man once again, and he was helpless. Before long, he began to sell off his farm, as he could no longer make his children work on the farm and nobody was willing to work for him. He sold his entire plot of land and went back into poverty. He sat down crying, but nobody could come to his help. Everybody knew Nduka was a wicked man. Before long, the mothers of his children heard, and they all came back, one after the other, to pick their children. The children were so happy to reunite with their mothers. The mothers were equally overjoyed to have their children back. When Adamma heard, she sent for the other wives and blessed each and every one of them with gold. They were so happy. And before long, more women heard about Adamma. The tree god had blessed her with so much gold, and she became a blessing to all the women in the community. And as for Nduka, he became a poor man and lived in poverty till the rest of his life, with no wife or child by his side.